Coleman as star of the Dunwich Horror, a suspense play produced, edited, and directed by William Spear. Come in, Dunwich, Massachusetts. Come in, Dunwich.
Good evening. This is Henry Armitage. I'm speaking to you... Dr. Rice, please close the window. I'm speaking to you from my laboratory on the slopes of Sentinel Hill near Dunwich, Massachusetts. Present with me is Dr. Warren Rice, my distinguished colleague from Miskatonic University. We are now about 100 yards from the summit of the hill, which is crowned by a huge table-like stone set in the center of a circle of stone pillars, a place of prehistoric worship. A moment ago, you may have heard the dogs of Dunwich Township barking, as we have heard them for 3 days and 3 nights. Dr. Rice and I know the horror which their barking portends, but the purpose of this broadcast is to make this unbelievable horror believable to you. I hope for your sakes and ours we are successful tonight. It is the eve of All Hallows. Tomorrow will be too late. Our time tonight is very short, so I'll speak only of those more recent events which, believe me, may culminate at any moment in a climax too frightful to wholly contemplate. I will begin with the birth of Wilbur Whately. It was the night of February the 2nd, 1921, Candlemas. Toward dawn, when Lavinia Whately, a deformed albino woman about 35 years old, gave birth to her dark, goatish-looking son in the crumbling Whately farmhouse northeast of the village. No one attended her. No doctor or midwife. No one was with her, except her aged, half-insane father, who was known as Wizard Whately. So Wilbur came into this world under heaven knows what incantations, what appeals to what powers. A week later, Wizard Whately drove his sleigh into Dunwich village and reported the event to a group of loungers in Osborne's general store.
Hey, your grandson got yellow hair like Lavinia, Wizard?
No, takes after his father more. He's dark.
You never spoke of who his father might be now, did you?
Oh, you'll know his father when the time comes. Oh, Lavinia's read and seen some things the most of you only talk about. Calculate her husband's as good as you can find this side of Aylesbury.
Well, we don't be nosy, Wizard.
Maybe it wasn't no church that none of you heard of. But you wouldn't ask no better church wedding than Lavinia's.
Well, I didn't hear tell of no wedding, Wizard. When was that?
Oh, not a wedding you'd hear of, Corey. Not a husband you'd hear of, neither. But let me tell you something. Someday you folks will hear a child of Lavinia's calling its father's name on top of Sentinel Hill.
Prophecy? Or idle boasting by an insane old man? Now, I know I ask a great deal when I ask you to believe that the arrival of an infant into that house of dire poverty and squalor could possibly constitute a horror and a threat to all our known world. Yet it has an earthly history. Perhaps through this history you will be able to give it credence. Wilbur Whately's growth was uncanny. But even if he had been an average child, he would have become, in time, an unnatural being, for he was surrounded from the first by the most malign influences. There was his grandfather, old Whately, Wizard Whately, who each Halloween climbed Sentinel Hill to the great circle of stone, and while the hills shook, stood holding a great book open on his arms and shrieked into the wind. Shrieked. Yog-Sothoth. That dreadful name, first mentioned in the hideous forbidden book, the Necronomicon. And this Wizard Whately was Wilbur's teacher. The villagers began to notice curious things that were going on at the Whately farmhouse. Soon after Wilbur was born, old Whately began to remodel the house. The abandoned upper story was restored, and all the windows were tightly boarded up. And then, Wizard began to buy cattle in large numbers, both horses and cows. Yet the livestock on the farm didn't seem to increase. Young Lem Brown was one day curious enough to creep close to the house to count the Waitley herd.
Dr. Armitage, there weren't more than 12 cows, and them sick. Looked like they had the blight and funny wounds on them, like cuts. I heard something, too, in the top part of Wizard's house. Something like water slapping inside, only big like a sea.
One other person went to the Waitley farm in the years before I met Wilbur. Dr. Ken Houghton of Aylesbury, who was called by Wilbur himself, who said that his grandfather was dying. Dr. Houghton found the old man in a bedroom on the ground floor, and Wilbur with him. While outside the window, a legion of whippoorwills cried loudly and rhythmically, endlessly. Wilbur spoke about the sound.
Listen, he's whistling time with his breathing now. They're ready. Listen, Doctor. They know his soul's going out. They're waiting.
Yes, Wilbur, that's an interesting superstition. Late in the year for them, too.
When he goes, if they catch him, they'll keep laughing till break of day. If they don't catch him, they'll quiet down.
You mean you believe that... just a minute. I think he's conscious.
Yes, the birds changed when his breathing changed. Like I say.
Willie!
I'm here.
More space, Willie. Remember, more space soon.
Yes, I'll build it.
You grows, but that grows faster. It'll be ready to serve you soon, Willie.
I know.
But remember, when it's time, you open up the gates to Yog Sothoth with the long chant, the one on page 751 of the book. But mind you, read it enough, because if it gets out before you opens to Yog Sothoth, it's all over. It's no use.
He's going now. He's dead, Wilbur.
Listen. The birds, they didn't get him. Yes, he's free. He's gone.
It was the winter following Wizard Waitley's death that I first met Wilbur. He came in person to the library at Miskatonic University to consult a copy of the hideous Necronomicon, which was kept there in its Latin version, as printed in Spain in the 17th century. I tell you, when he came into my office, I was appalled at his appearance. 8 feet tall, shabby, dirty, bearded. But I was even more appalled by his voice when he spoke to me.
I wrote you a letter a month past, Doctor. I wanted a loan of the book.
Well, that's a book that's never loaned from this library. I doubt if it is from any library.
Well, I have to see it then.
Oh, very well. It's kept right here. As you know, there are only 3 copies of this book in existence. That's why we're careful. Here, you can look at it on this table.
Wizard said it would be on page 751.
What? What is it you're looking for?
The formula, the long chant. The one that opens the gate to Yog Sothoth.
I felt a wave of fright as tangible as a draught from the tomb. It seemed somehow like the spawn of another dimension, like something only partly of mankind, linked to black gulfs beyond all spheres of force and matter, space and time. And presently he raised his head and spoke again.
It's here, all right, but I'll have to have a copy.
That paragraph there? I don't know.
You know Latin, Doctor?
Yes, certainly.
Then read it, Doctor. Let's hear how you make it out.
All right, that shouldn't be difficult. Let's see. Nor is it to be thought that man is the oldest or the last of Earth's masters. The old ones were, and the old ones shall be. Not in the spaces that we know, but between them. But only Yog-Sothoth knows the gate. Yog-Sothoth is the gate to where the old ones broke through of old. Their hands are at your throats, yet ye see them not.
Dr. Armitage, you see, I reckon I've got to take that book home. There's things in it I've got to try, and you can't hold me up.
No, I'm sorry.
I tell you, Doctor, I'll have the book sooner or later, no matter what. You see, that's waiting for me at home won't wait much longer.
It was a week later that I was awakened suddenly by the fierce yelping of the great watchdog on the campus, followed by a sound from a wholly different throat, a scream. And I knew instantly that Wilbur had come back for the Necronomicon. I hastened into my clothes and rushed across to the library where a crowd had gathered before the smashed window of my office. Inside, there was a fearful groaning and growling, and some instinct warned me that what was taking place there was not for unfortified eyes to see. I brushed back the crowd, motioning only to Professor Rice to come in with me. When we opened the study door, Professor Rice screamed.
No, Dr. Armitage, no, I can't.
Come, close the door. We can't let them see. He's alive, but Lord, what a job that dog's done. Torn him to bits. Oh, it's a horrible sound, that moaning. Suppose we ought to call a doctor?
A doctor? A doctor for that? No doctor in the world would know what to do for that. Look, Armitage, it's not human, nor animal. Where did it come from? Can you tell me? Can you tell me what it is?
No, I couldn't tell what Wilbur Whately was. The thing that lay half bent on its side in a pool of greenish-yellow stickiness was 9 feet tall. And the dog had torn off all the clothing and some of the skin. It was partly human, beyond a doubt, with very man-like hands and head, but the torso and lower parts of the body were fabulous. Its chest had the leathery hide of a crocodile or alligator. But below the waistline, the skin was covered with coarse black fur. And from the abdomen, long greenish-gray tentacles. The limbs terminated in ridgy-veined pads that were neither hooves nor claws. And as Dr. Rice and I stood staring at this presence, the whippoorwills began to cry in unison outside the study window. And then the thing on the floor roused and mumbled.
God. Yog-Sothoth. Yog-Sothoth.
Armitage, in heaven's name.
Listen. The whippoorwills. Listen. Yes, he's dead now. Look, Rice. Look what's happening.
He's disintegrating.
Of course. Fast, too. Fading away. Because he isn't made of matter as we know it on Earth. I guess he took after his father. So there'll be nothing left.
His father? What was his father?
I daren't think. I thought then that what came into our world with Wilbur Whately left with him. I forgot what he himself had told me of it, which was waiting in the sealed house Wizard Whately had built, where the cattle were driven to disappear. But Wilbur Whately left a diary, written in a strange alphabet resembling Sanskrit. And I worked off and on for weeks to decipher it. And finally, I read the following passage written by Wilbur when he was no more than 8 years old.
That upstairs is more ahead of me than I had thought it would be. It is not like to have much earth brain. I can see it a little when I make the sign or blow the powder of Ibengatze at it. And it is like them I see Halloween on the hill. I wonder how I shall look when the earth is cleared and there are no earth beings. Maybe like that upstairs looks, which has no body, even fed with all the blood.
Toward morning, in a cold sweat of terror, I called Dr. Rice to my house and told him we have to destroy what's in that farmhouse.
Why can't we just leave the thing locked up there? The house is boarded tight.
Yes, but you think boards will hold it? Don't you realize, man, it hasn't been fed? It hasn't had blood since the 18th of September, when Wilbur Whately came here to die. We left for Dunwich that night, and we've been here on Sentinel Hill ever since, working desperately to discover the formula in time. But a week ago tonight, shortly after dawn... Yeah, hello?
Dr. Armitage, this is Lem Brown. I was just up beyond the glen, Doctor, looking for cows I lost last night.
Yes, Lem?
Well, Doctor, something's been there. Smells like thunder, and there's prints in the road. Great round prints, big as barrel heads, like a elephant has been along.
Anything else, Lem?
That's all I see. Except bushes and trees pushed back from the road, like a house was drug along.
Oh. Did you hear anything?
Yes, long toward morning, I heard a sound over toward Whately's place, a kind of ripping or tearing of wood, like a big box was being opened up. Chancy, you heard it too.
Lem, who lives nearest the Whately farm?
Why, that'd be Elmer Fry's place.
Oh, he's on this line too, isn't he? Hang on and I'll ring him.
Yes, Dr. Armitage, this is Central.
I'm trying to get Elmer Fry, Central.
Doctor, he must be out somewheres, and his whole family. I was ringing there an hour ago. Earl Sawyer saw Elmer's cows stampeding in Cold Spring Glen.
Oh, you didn't get him, hmm? All right. But if you hear or see anything more, let me know. I'll be here working all day. Rise. Oh, wake up. It's loose. It's out of the house. One family gone already. We have to work. Pray God we find that formula in time. A week since it broke loose. A week of terror and panic here in Dunwich Township. Each night it moves about the countryside, leaving the trees crushed in a 30-foot swathe, as though by a moving mountain, leaving its monstrous tracks and a trail of tarry stickiness, leaving crushed and gutted farmhouses and whole herds of cattle drained of blood. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that is the story to this moment. And tonight is Halloween. Tonight we are here to... Oh, just one moment, please. Dr. Rice, did you hear something?
With the window closed, no.
Well, we'll throw it open. I thought so. Listen. The sound from 1,000 bending trees. A sound like the sea moving across a forest. Yes, it's coming here, of course. All Hallows, it comes to Sentinel Hill. Dr. Rice, I'll try the formula and the powder from the altar stone. I want you to stay here at the microphone and report what you see.
Very well, Dr. Armitage.
Oh, wait a minute before I go. To any scientists who may be listening to me, if I fail, there is a possible alternative formula in Falconer's Mystical Formulae of the Middle Ages on page 24. Listen. Well, there are the whippoorwills. I better get out there. Take over, Dr. Rice.
Yes, I'll do as well as I can, Armitage. Good luck. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Armitage is climbing to the top of the hill, to the altar stone. I can see him plainly, for the moon is high and the night clear. Down the hill, toward the dark village, I can see the grasses and shrubbery bending down, marking the monster's ascent. It moves quite fast, and I feel a proximity to phases of being utterly forbidden. And now, Dr. Armitage stands now on the altar stone and is holding the powder which, if the books are correct, will make this thing for an instant visible. It is quite close to him now, perhaps 20 yards or less. He lifts his hands, he flings the powder in a wide arc. I can see... Oh, no! No!
Dr. Rice. Come in, Dunwich. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your suspense announcer. Due to conditions... Oh, just a moment, please. One moment, please. Dr. Rice, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Yes, for a moment I was overcome when I saw... Ladies and gentlemen, perhaps you can hear now the incantation of Dr. Armitage. Listen. The whippoorwills mean death. And Dr. Armitage is walking back here now. So we know that whatever it was, it is gone. It is dead. We can be thankful indeed. You see, I saw Dr. Armitage.
Yes. Did you see it, Dr. Rice?
I saw it, Lord, yes.
What did it look like to you?
It looked
Here.
like something made of squirming ropes, but bigger than a barn and shaped, well, like an egg, and dozens of legs, like barrels that half closed when it stepped, and nothing solid about it, and at least 15 or 20 mouths or trunks opening and closing, but what was it?
Oh, a kind of force. The kind of force that doesn't belong in our part of space. Did you notice the half face on top?
Half face, like a human face.
Yes, very large, but yes, quite human. And quite like Wilbur's, like all the Waitley's.
Then it was...
That's right. It was Wilbur's twin brother. And you saw what 3 weeks' growth had done. And it was the child of Lavinia's who called its father's name on Sentinel Hill, as Wizard Waitley prophesied. You heard it calling, Yog Sotho. Ladies and gentlemen, this night is over. It is All Saints' Day. May heaven bless us all.
The Dunwich Horror, with Ronald Colman as your star of Suspense. This is the Armed Forces Radio Service.
Suspense. Tonight, Roma Wines bring you Mr. Lee J. Cobb as star of The Bet, a suspense play produced, edited, and directed for Roma Wines by William Spear.
Suspense, radio's outstanding theater of thrills, is presented for your enjoyment by Roma Wines. That's R-O-M-A, Roma Wines. Those excellent California wines that can add so much pleasantness to the way you live, to your happiness in entertaining guests, to your enjoyment of everyday meals. Yes, right now a glassful would be very pleasant, as Roma Wines bring you Mr. Lee J. Cobb in a remarkable tale of Suspense.
I'm haunted. It's a year now, and I can't erase the memory of that precipice that I nearly stepped from. That darkness into which I almost plunged. Or maybe I took the plunge and I'm in it now, in the dark. It doesn't usually happen in my business. But what's the use of talking about it? You'd only say I'm too susceptible. And I'd say you're right, I am susceptible. To faces and places. To women's faces. One woman's face. And to lost, dark places on what I call the rim of the world. Places like Sierra Leone, Saigon, Balsall. Places like Trinidad. But you won't get it from reading atlases and maps. If you read, for instance, that the seasons of Trinidad are regular, wet from May to January, dry from the end of January to May, the average annual rainfall 63 inches, you won't understand how I saw it when I landed at Port of Spain in April, the dry season. I remember it was a day so clear and bright that it was a world under glass. And I liked it. I liked the harbor, cathedrals, the old streets, the dry, spiced air, and that little shop I wandered into to get away from the blaze of the sun. I'd heard she went there. Siam Brahmachari shop of Hindu antiquities. Hello? Anybody here?
Certainly. Good afternoon. I am Siam Brahmachari.
Oh, it's dark. I didn't see.
Yes, I live here like a mole, and when the clock rings, it brings me customers every time. What can I show you?
Well, I thought I'd look around.
It's a pleasure. Look as you wish. You're a stranger in Port of Spain?
I landed today.
And you're an artist?
Well, how did you...
That's a sketch pad you carry.
Oh, yes. Yes, You'll
paint. Find Trinidad charming to paint until the rains come, Mr.
Scott Turner.
Mr. Scott Turner, yes. It's lovely until next month, then the green rain until the first of the year.
Well, that sounds paintable, the rain. By the way, I believe you know a Mrs.
The rain? Oh, no. It comes down so there's no... Pardon, please. Mrs. Barton, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Siam. Did my Shiva get here?
Yesterday, Mrs. Barton, I took him out of his straw nest. Yesterday. A beautiful white jade Shiva. I'll bring him in.
Thank you.
Oh, but first, this is Mr. Turner, a newcomer and an artist.
Oh? How do you do?
How do you do?
Talk to him till I return, Mrs. Barton. I want him to see our Shiva, too.
Well, we have our orders, Mr. Turner.
Yes. What is it, a statue?
A small one. It's my hobby. I collect Hindu gods. Do you know about them?
Oh, little. I've been to India.
This is one I've wanted a long time. A statuette of Shiva from the dead city of Angkor Wat. It was buried for 3,000 years.
You see? He's small, Mrs. Barton, but he's perfect. Look, not a blemish.
Siam, he's beautiful. Isn't he beautiful, Mr. Turner?
A great god, Shiva. Yes, he's quite the boy. 200 million people believe he controls lightning, thunder, their very lives. Shiva. Beloved of women.
Yes, he is, isn't he?
And beloved by you, Mrs. Barton.
Oh, no. No. I have my own reason for being attracted to Shiva.
Yeah? What's your reason?
Don't you remember what Shiva is, first of all? He's the god of destruction, Mr. Turner. And I like that. Destruction. That's the kind of woman I am.
She liked destruction. Of course, I knew that already about Ada Barton. She must have loved Trinidad, a place where a casual conversation turns suddenly intense, suddenly dangerous, where you never know the whirlpool under your feet until you're in it. I was in that whirlpool in a second, and I'm still there. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I had no difficulty meeting Ada Barton again. You know how colonial cities are. The teeming population that belongs and the handful of English, Americans, French, administrators, speculators, painters, planters, who huddle together socially because, well, they're afraid. And even so ungregarious a man as Paul Barton wasn't above inviting a visiting American to his home. But no matter how we'd met, he and I were bound to disagree.
So you're an artist, Mr. Turner. Well, I envy you. It must be pleasant not to have to work for your living.
Well, naturally, I don't look at it that way.
Paul, for heaven's sake.
Oh, but Ada, my dear, surely neither you nor Mr. Turner contend painting is labor, not productive labor.
But that's not the point.
Well, I think it's a point. And I think painting is productive. Although I must confess that painting seldom produces for the painter comfort such as you have here. I wish it did.
More coffee, Scott.
Please, Miss Barton.
Well, naturally, millions buy my sugar because it's a necessity. A picture on the wall isn't.
It is for me, Paul.
It is for the millions who buy your sugar, Mr. Barton. At least it's necessary for me to believe it's a necessity to them. A necessity for which they're starved. But I think your difference with me is more personal, Mr. Barton.
Oh, now, wait a minute.
You see, I think you envy me.
I envy you?
Because you're a romantic who never found whatever you came here for. This is a beautiful island, Mr. Barton.
In the dry season, yes.
You've built a beautiful house. And you're married to an extraordinarily beautiful woman.
Thank you, Mr. Turner.
But because you've pegged your dream to what the morning stock market has to say on the price of sugar, it's all ashes to you. So you resent me, the itinerant artist, symbol of the freedom you lost.
Ashes? I love it. I'm a man who likes organization utility, and there's plenty of romance in sugar.
As much as there is in a Portuguese sloop, Java-bound, or in the ruined streets of Palmyra, gulls flashing in the sun over Sicily, or in the port of Spain tonight, with its smell of fast-growing things, to a man like me who can claim the whole world because no part of it claims him.
You are very persuasive, Mr. Turner.
You know what I think? I think you're irresponsible, Mr. Turner, because you haven't the necessary courage to take responsibility.
Paul, you're insulting.
Maybe, but I put years of hard work into developing this business.
And you don't think I've worked?
No, I don't think you have, and I don't think you can. Why, I'd bet $50,000 that you couldn't stick to a useful routine job for 2 years.
What you call a useful routine job?
Yes. I'll put up $50,000 that you couldn't stick it out, say, here, where you think it's so beautiful, working for me.
Paul, don't be ridiculous. You can't buy everything with your money. I have an idea that Mr. Turner is the sort of man...
Maybe he can. What kind of work, Mr. Barton?
You can't be serious, Scott.
Oh, it would be work that you can do, say, in my laboratory. I've got some things going on tropical diseases in addition to the necessary laboratory work for the sugar, soil tests, things like that.
Well, I'm not a technician.
Oh, I'd make it easy for you. I'm the technician. All you'd have to do is keep routine records for 2 years.
For $50,000?
That's right, $50,000. Or if you quit, nothing.
It's a bet, Mr. Barton. It's a bet. What's that?
What?
That.
Rain, Mr. Turner. Rain for 9 months. Endless, remorseless oceans of romantic rain. It'll make it easier for you to stay indoors.
Endless, remorseless rain. I liked it at first because it blurred the passage of time. And somehow my job wasn't easy. In the fields around the laboratory, the cane grew up, was cut, grew and was cut. But inside the laboratory where I lived day and night, all sound and life came wrapped in the silken, deadly, hypnotic drumming and hissing of rain. The first 2 months, only one thing bothered me. The petty needling of Paul Barton. We spent our mornings together, he making his tests while I wrote them up for the files. Scarcely a day went by when he didn't say something sharp or bitter.
Well, how's the romantic Mr. Turner today? Can you read any poetry into the smell of aniline dyes? 2 years, Scott, 2 years. You see what you're heading for? A laboratory stoop. And this rain will grow mole in your curly artist lock. I guarantee it.
Yes, my wife Ada fancies art too, Scott. She buys little things, paintings, statues. But she buys them with money from sugarcane, Scott. Or had you forgotten that?
I hadn't forgotten that. I hadn't forgotten Ada. A dangerous woman. And I knew how dangerous. I knew things about her he didn't know. That she liked destruction. And every time he lashed out at me, I knew more. That for her own destructive purposes, she was feeding him this hate of me, nurturing it with intention and care. Well, in the tropics, things grow fast. And Ada Barton's purposes grew fast. To full flower. In the afternoons when Paul was out in the cane fields, she began to visit me in the laboratory.
He's right. You are getting a squeak.
Close the door.
And a squint. It definitely doesn't become you, Scott.
I thought you were going into Port of Spain today.
Did I say that?
Oh, I heard something to that effect. And so did Paul.
The roads are swamped, and besides, something's wrong with the car. One of the wires.
Oh. You wouldn't know which wire.
I don't know what it's for, but if it's broken, the car won't run. I know that. Must you keep working? It isn't very polite of you.
This isn't a salon, Ada. And these sculptures have to be put away.
You know, Scott, this whole business of your bet with Paul shocks me a little.
I'm sorry.
I mean, it shocks me to see what he's doing to you.
I'm shocked to see what you're doing to him, Ada.
Don't change the subject. Why do you put up with it? Why do you stay here?
Isn't $50,000 an understandable motive to you?
Not for a man like you. You must have another motive.
Believe me, I haven't. I'm just that crass.
Not even me, Scott.
You might have been a motive. At first.
Now I don't compete with Java, the gulls of Sicily.
Look, Ada, why don't you give him a break? You don't mind taking his money. Why don't you take his turns, too? He doesn't ask much.
Why don't you kiss me, Scott?
Ada.
Yes.
Whose destruction, Ada?
Destruction?
Yes. Which of us have you marked to destroy? Paul or me?
For Suspense, Roma Wines are bringing you as star Mr. Lee J. Cobb in The Bet by Donald S. Ryerson. Roma Wines' presentation tonight in radio's outstanding theater of thrills, Suspense.
Between the acts of Suspense, this is Truman Bradley for Roma Wines. Have you invited friends or family to dinner tomorrow night? Then here's a timely suggestion from famed hostess Elsa Maxwell. Welcoming guests with Roma California Sherry is becoming an American custom. My guests compliment me when I serve Roma Sherry with simple hors d'oeuvres or cheese. Roma Sherry served cool is a delicious appetizer before the meal, the perfect first call for dinner. Yes, and Roma Sherry is delightful later in the evening, too. Glorious golden amber Roma Sherry is a happy, mellow wine with natural fragrance. Cream-rich with natural grape sugar sweetness and nut-like taste. If you prefer a dry sherry, get Roma California Pale Dry Sherry, famous for its light, nut-like taste. It's a good idea to keep both Roma Sherry types in the house and give your guests their choice. Remember, because of uniformly fine quality at low cost, more Americans enjoy Roma than any other wine.
And now Roma Wines bring back to our Hollywood soundstage Lee J. Cobb as Scott Turner in The Bet, a play well calculated to keep you in suspense.
I knew, if I wouldn't face it then, I knew whom she'd marked for destruction. Because I knew a lot about what kind of woman she was. And it wasn't more than 6 months before she'd laid her cards on the table.
$500,000, Scott. $500,000. And I'm his beneficiary.
But if you'll wait, Ada...
More than 18 months to go. I won't wait.
But we'll have our money then.
What? $50,000.
Anyway, it can't be done. We wouldn't get away with it.
You haven't even let me tell you how we can.
When a man's insured for so much, his death is sure to be investigated. I know.
I know, too.
And an insurance investigator is thorough. He won't accept your grief no matter how well you can act. And he won't accept my being here. He'll find out who and why.
He'll find out nothing that isn't on the death certificate. Listen to me.
Darling, don't force me into this.
Listen. Besides malaria, there are 2 diseases in Trinidad that kill hundreds every year. Typhoid and amoeba histolytica.
My dear, please, all our lives...
Paul's healthy, so he might recover from either one alone. But if he has both together...
No, Ada. No matter how simple you make it, I won't...
Now, you go to the hospital at least once a week for laboratory supplies. You must have seen where they keep specimens, typhoid, microbes, amoebas.
No, really. The risk...
You won't gamble for these stakes. You'll be rich. You'll be with me. Scott, do you know where they keep the specimens?
Ada, you remind me of something.
Why don't you answer me?
A spider spins a web.
Scott!
A male spider comes courting her, but before she'll have him, he has to catch a blue fly and bring it to her wrapped in his silk so that she can eat it alive.
Scott!
Then she accepts her mate. But the next day, she eats him alive.
That's a horrible story. You don't really think that I'm...
No. I don't suppose I do.
You'll get the microbes then, won't you? Won't you, Scott?
Ada, let me think about it a little while. Let me at least pretend I'm a man with a conscience. Oh, Paul, I wasn't expecting you this afternoon.
Yes, I know. You were expecting Ada. Well, she's here, too.
Hello, Scott.
Hello.
I just stopped by for a moment to tell you I have to go to Tobago.
Tobago?
Yes, I have a grinding plant there, and we're installing a new engine. I'll be gone about 2 days.
I told Paul that Tobago in this weather...
Oh, yes, you're taking chances, Paul.
I take enough Atabrin to keep on the right side of malaria. Don't worry, I'll be all right.
Yes, but there are other things, typhoid.
I've never known you to be so concerned before, Ada.
Oh, Paul.
Oh, if it weren't for certain other factors, my dear, I'd be touched, believe me.
What other factors?
I don't want to be sordid, Ada. Surely I don't have to describe a situation you and Scott know better.
What do you mean?
All right. All right, we'll maintain the cultivated surface if you wish. By the way, Scott, how do you feel now about our bet?
The same as before, that I'll win it.
Yeah, well, perhaps. Lately, I thought the whole thing was a mistake, at least on my part.
Want to call it off?
I didn't say that exactly. I'll tell you, we'll talk about it when I get back, the 3 of us. I may have a counter-proposal.
Paul, you wouldn't dare.
All right. We'll talk about it.
Fine. I'll be looking forward to it. Well, Ada?
I think I'll sit here a while, Paul. It's so peaceful now that the rain stopped.
Huh. It has stopped. I didn't notice.
A truce. A false peace. It'll begin soon again. Well, goodbye, then.
Goodbye, Paul. Take care. You heard? You heard what he said?
He's a little excited, Ada. It didn't mean anything.
Don't be a fool. It means you haven't any choice now.
There's always a choice.
Well, yes. Now you can choose me with $500,000 on nothing. Not 1 red cent.
But he didn't say he wouldn't pay.
That's what he means. He hates us. Both of us. His only weapon is his money. What a triumph for him to hoax you into slaving here for 8 months and then throw you out.
Oh, no, he wouldn't dare.
Don't you think I know him? You have to do what I say.
How will you give it to him? The microbes?
In his food. It'll only take a drop. Say in caviar. He's a pig for it, like he is about everything else. Caviar, highly seasoned with sauce.
You've really planned this?
Somebody has to plan. Do you want to?
No.
Well, he'll be home day after tomorrow. He'll ask you to come to the house for tea. I'll give it to him then, so it will look like he caught them in Tobago.
Ada, I'm not sure that I can... I'm not...
I am sure. It's the only thing we can do. You love me, Scott. Will you get the specimens from the hospital? Will you?
If anyone had told me that I could do...
Will you get the specimens, Scott?
All right. I'll get them this afternoon. That afternoon, the rains had stopped. It was no fall's peace. The season was over, 2 weeks early. I drove into Port of Spain through a crawling, chalk white mist, through the strong, heady smell of decaying jungle. And the cessation of sound was enormous in my ears. It was as though the rain had stopped on a shout. I got the specimens, 2 tiny tubes of dynamically living death. When I stored them away in the laboratory refrigerator, I riveted my mind on Ada's face and her incomparable voice.
We can do so much together, Scott. You're a savage like me. Remember how you looked at Shiva that first day? I could tell we're alike. No little stifling moralities. We're beyond such things, you and me, beyond pity or shame.
Yes, quite beyond shame. Or pity.
Be very careful, my darling. Eat only the caviar without the sauce. We'll leave all the rest for him.
The afternoon Paul Barton came back, I walked to the house he was so proud of. There was a mist still on the ground, but thinning fast. The dry season had begun. The only sound beside my footsteps was the last rainfall dripping from the giant trees and the hushed, mysterious voice of the jungle itself. Ada met me at the door. You can't possibly understand about her face. Vitality isn't the word. There is no word. Her face was the indestructible essence of life. When I saw her, there were no more doubts. She took me into the room where she kept the Hindu gods, where Paul was already sitting over his tea.
Oh, hello, Scott. Come in.
Well, you did invite me.
Of course, but you surprised me again. You're punctual as well as tenacious.
Help yourself to tea, Scott. I'll get the caviar.
Thanks, Ada. I'm sorry I disappoint you so often, Paul.
Disappoint me?
By not conforming to your preconceived portrait of an artist.
Oh, that's not where I misjudged. I had a preconceived portrait of the kind of man my wife thinks she wants. She wants a fool and a weakling.
Well, I won't sit here and discuss...
Here's the caviar, with sauce and without. And some new crackers over from England. Native pastry for you, Scott. You like sweets. Pull out that little table.
I'll do it.
Thanks, dear.
You're right, Scott. You're right. We won't discuss that. That's beside the point. Counter-proposal.
Oh, Paul, let's not have unpleasantness right away.
You assume it's unpleasant, not for me. I just want to say I'm closing the laboratory. Push the crackers over, Ada.
I'd like to hear your reason.
The research is no longer necessary, and I want you to leave Trinidad.
You're worried about Ada, aren't you?
Oh. We're dropping the cultivated surface, aren't we? Well, yes. Caviar and sauce. My wife prepares us very well, Scott.
Yes. I wonder how well you know her.
I know her pretty well. Now you're thinking of the 50,000, of course. Oh, really, Scott, try this. Ada puts everything in it. Did I say something?
Put it down.
What?
Put the caviar down, Paul. It's deadly.
Scott, you fool.
Yes, there's everything in it, including death. Typhoid, amoebas. She prepared it very well.
Ada, is this...
I'm going to kill you, Scott. I hadn't intended to just yet.
I know. Oh, of course you'd have a gun. How many men have you killed, Ada? How many helpless, hypnotized men have helped you to kill and then have themselves died? How many husbands, lovers?
How did you know?
I'm not such a romantic figure, Ada. I came here with some previous knowledge of you. You see, I was sent here for a purpose. I didn't meet you by accident. But I didn't know what you'd be like. How much of a spell you and the rain could cast. But it's over. The rains and everything. Yes, I was sent to investigate because of all the insurance.
An insurance man, how dismal. You don't deserve even the...
You killed her. You killed her.
Yes. I killed her. I'm haunted. I keep away from rain because she flourishes if it rains too long. She comes back like a dank, strong jungle vine, flowered and perfumed, but tough to the core. She winds herself around me. She tries to drag me once more to that precipice above that darkness, an existence beyond shame or pity or morality.
Roma Wines have brought you Lee J. Cobb as star of The Bet, tonight's study in Suspense.
This is Truman Bradley for Roma Wines, the sponsor of Suspense. Here's extra good news for you. You can now enjoy the taste luxury of Roma Wines at the lowest prices in years. Yes, the high quality of Roma Wines is unchanged, as good as ever, but Roma's new low prices enable you to save as much as 1/4. You can now enjoy Roma Wines more often. Roma, California wines offer you sherry, port, muscatel, and tokay for entertaining, Burgundy and Sauterne for mealtime pleasure, and Roma champagne to make any occasion unforgettable. Each of these fine Roma wines brings you the goodness of luscious grapes, gathered at peak of flavor, gently pressed, then unhurriedly brought to delicious perfection under the patient guidance of Roma's ancient winemaking skill. Bottled at Roma's own famed wineries, located in California's choicest vineyard districts. Roma wines are true wines, always unvaryingly good. Now featured by your dealer at new low prices. Always insist on Roma wines. No other wines offer you so much for so little. Roma. R-O-M-A. Roma wines.
Lee J. Cobb appears through the courtesy of 20th Century Fox and will soon be seen in his first role since leaving the service, Anna and the King of Siam. Next Thursday, Roma Wines bring you Mr. Zachary Scott in Suspense, radio's outstanding theater of thrills.
Presented by Roma Wines, R-O-M-A. Made in California for enjoyment throughout the world. This is CBS, the Columbia Broadcasting System. Now, the Roma Wine Company of Fresno, California presents
Suspense. Tonight, Roma Wines bring you Mr. Zachary Scott, a star of Murder Off Key, a suspense play produced, edited, and directed for Roma Wines by William Spear.
Suspense, radio's outstanding theater of thrills, is presented for your enjoyment by Roma Wines. That's R-O-M-A, Roma Wines. Those excellent California wines that can add so much pleasantness to the way you live, to your happiness in entertaining guests, to your enjoyment of everyday meals. Yes, right now a glassful would be very pleasant, as Roma Wines bring you Mr. Zachary Scott in a remarkable tale of suspense.
If I could just shut out that singing, I'd be all right. But it goes on pounding inside my head, and I keep hearing Violet screech those desperate, urgent scales. The first time I heard her, I was sitting on the balcony outside the apartment, and everything was unnaturally still, the way it is late at night. And maybe that's why her singing sounded louder than it actually was. There was something abnormal about it, as though a control inside her had snapped, and she couldn't stop that horrible noise that was coming from her throat. It went on over and over again, rising and falling and scraping the hot night into shreds.
She's pretty terrible, isn't she?
What?
I'm over here on the next balcony.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see you. What did you say?
She's pretty terrible, isn't she? And she thinks that's a trained voice.
Awful. Does she do it often or only when the moon is full?
Oh, she goes on like that almost every evening. You must be new around here.
I just got into New York this afternoon.
Are you visiting Mr. Morley?
Well, in a way. He went out of town. I'm staying in his apartment.
I didn't mean to sound prying, but he told me he was going on a vacation, and I wondered if he'd left.
Her family must be all deaf mutes.
No, she lives alone.
Well, that's not hard to understand. Hasn't the manager done anything about it?
She has too much money. They'd never ask her to move. But someone should do something.
They could always try strangling her.
What did you say?
They could always try strangling her.
Oh, she heard you.
Oh, do you think so?
I hope so. Well, I must be going in. Good night.
Good night.
Roses are shining in the
It was in the lobby the next afternoon that I met her. When she came up to me, I knew instinctively that she was the songbird of the night before. She was past middle age and was ignoring it. Her hair was dyed and piled up in coquettish curls, and she used some kind of heavy, sweet perfume that was overpowering. She came tripping up with the usual old white poodle dog yapping at her heels.
Pardon me. Would you hold this package for a moment? I have so many things I'll never find my keys.
Well, I was just...
Thank you so much. Oh, now, Hetty. Is that nice, making such a fuss at this charming gentleman?
Oh, no,
what will he think? Oh, I don't know what I'm going to do if this weather keeps up.
Yes, it's...
I've always been on the delicate side, and I've never been able to stand the heat. When my husband was alive, he's dead now, he always whisked me away to the ocean the first warm days. Even when I was in the theater. Oh, my manager would be furious.
Well, I can understand it.
I can't imagine where my key is. Would you hold Teddy for me?
Well, I don't know.
Oh, thank you. Now, Teddy, and he won't hurt you.
Well.
Oh, my husband used to say to me, Violet, my real name is Imogene, but he called me Violet.
Well,
it's always been my favorite color. Violet, he used to say, you must go to the sea, or you'll be withering those lovely petals of yours. And before I knew it, we were in Atlantic City.
It's very nice.
Oh, here's that horrid little key on my key ring of all places.
Well, those things sometimes happen.
Thank you so much. I don't know what I would have done without you. My husband used to say, Violet, you're a woman who needs a man around. Of course, he was a pillar of strength himself. Oh, and to think of his dying of a gallbladder that way. Well, thank you again. Now, what did you say your name is?
Oh, Carlson.
Oh, how nice. Carlson. Such a sturdy, dependable name. So suitable for a man. You must come up and have tea with me sometime.
Well,
I have a special Chinese brand. It smells like dead flowers.
Going up?
Going up, but au revoir until we meet again.
That next meeting would be never, as far as I was concerned at that point, but it actually happened that night. She was at the scales again about 9 o'clock, and there was a desperate urgency in her singing. It was a last frantic attempt to stop the clock and the double chins and the fading light. Those pathetic scales had a shrill terror that made me embarrassed listening to them. Well, as though I were eavesdropping on some shameful secret. It was then that I went to leave the balcony and saw the sheet music lying behind the urn. My first impulse was a humanitarian one, and I threw it in the wastebasket. But for some unknown reason, I suddenly felt a kind of pity for that woman singing alone up there. And the next thing I knew, I was on my way upstairs with the music.
Yes, what do you want?
Oh, is Violet in?
Violet? I'm sorry, old boy. She must have given you the wrong number.
Oh, I thought it was on this floor.
Oh, hold on. If you mean Mrs. Pondecker, it's the next apartment.
Oh, sorry to have bothered you.
Going in for tea? Or do you have your own bank account?
Thank you very much.
Oh, not at all, not at all. I'm always glad to help a music lover.
As I stood there in the hall, I began to think about that leer he had given me. And I was about to turn back when the door opened.
Oh, Mr. Carlson, you've come for that tea after all. How nice. Be quiet, Petty. Be quiet. Do come here.
Oh, but I just found
You're not heard the word. Come along.
Violet had outdone herself, and a trailing negligee of purple chiffon and the usual clutching hand went with the outfit. There was something obscene about the hand fingers, heavy with diamonds, the nail polish too red. Obscene and pathetic. The room was heavy and operatic, just like her. There were glass cases and curio cabinets filled with every imaginable kind of glittering thing. Rings and bracelets, brooches. Most of it in terrible taste, but all of it unquestionably expensive.
Oh, admiring my collection? Most everyone does. Your friend Mr. Morley just... Petty, be quiet. Oh, I do believe he's jealous of you. You know he has a sixth sense about admirers. I remember when I was in the theater, he used to carry on dreadfully when my dressing room was filled with fans. He bit my husband in the leg. Oh, now, sit down in this chair. I'm afraid all the others are too small for a big man like you.
Well, I really came to return this music. It must have blown down on my balcony.
Oh, Roses of Picardy. It's always been one of my favorites. My husband simply adored it. I remember I sang it to him on Saturday night. And that Sunday afternoon, he was dead.
Well, that must have been quite a shock.
Oh, I sometimes wonder that I found the courage and strength to go on. Of course, my music has been a great consolation. Now, you sit right down. I won't be a moment. Petty will look after you. Won't you, Petty, huh? The roses are shining. You sit here and answer that. It's probably the elevator boy.
I've come to take the... Oh, a new one.
Yes, what is it?
I came for Mrs. Pondecker's dog to take him for a walk.
Here he is, and he's all yours.
Thanks. Come on, Rintin.
I didn't care for the way the elevator boy smirked. And as I sat there in her apartment with that heavy perfume suffocating me, I cared less for the trapped feeling I was beginning to have. It wasn't until 2 days later in the garage that the trap closed.
Good morning, Mr. Carlson. Can I do something for you?
Oh, no, thanks, Joe. Just want to get my sunglasses out of the compartment.
Well, your car's right over here. I cleaned her up for you. Gee, it was a mess, let me tell you. You must have run into something.
What?
The whole front was stuck with brown stuff and white fur, like you hit a dog or a cat, maybe.
Funny, I don't remember hitting anything.
Well, don't worry. I cleaned it off.
Hey, Joe.
Yeah?
Wait a minute.
Wait, something wrong?
Tell that help of yours my car's in an ash can. They dumped all these old newspapers in the back.
Oh, gee, I'm sorry, Mr. Carlson. Well, just give them to me. I'll throw them out. Boy, they sure are a mess. Looks like something out of a butcher shop, don't it? Well, it won't happen again, sir. You bet your bottom dollar on that.
When I came upstairs, I was still trying to figure out the angle of those stained old newspapers, but I didn't have long to wait. I found out the minute I stepped into the lobby.
Oh, Mr. Carlson, thank heaven you're here. I've been out of my mind. It's Petty. He's disappeared. We can't find him anywhere. I just know he's been run over. I just know it.
Run over? Well, when did all this happen?
Last night, when this wretched boy took him out.
Oh, look, Mrs. Pondecker, it's like I told you. I only stopped in for a cup of coffee, and the next thing I know, the dog is gone.
Of course he's gone. Some uncouth person in that saloon undoubtedly made off with him. Well, there's only one thing to do, and that is to offer a large reward. Don't you agree, Mr. Carlson?
Oh, yes, that's a good idea. But I knew then, as sure as I was standing there, that nothing would bring Petty back. Just as I knew that he had been in my car sometime last night, lying on some old newspapers. That's why I wasn't too surprised at first when the heavy blonde man with the soft voice came to see me.
Mr. Frederick Carlson?
Yes, that's right.
I'm from headquarters. I'd like to ask you a couple of questions about this Pondecker business.
Have they found the dog?
You didn't know about that, huh?
Well, she mentioned it to me.
You two were pretty friendly, weren't you?
Well, I spoke to her a couple of times. Hey, what is this? I don't... Come into my place full of innuendos. I don't see
There's no need to get excited, Mr. Carlson. I'm just checking up on the people who last saw her alive.
What are you talking about? She's dead?
Very much so. She was strangled sometime last night.
For Suspense, Roma Wines are bringing you as star Mr. Zachary Scott in Murder Off Key by Gene Russ Kern. Roma Wines' presentation tonight in radio's outstanding theater of thrills, Suspense.
Between the acts of Suspense, this is Truman Bradley for Roma Wines. This holiday season will be a round of gay homecomings, joyous reunions, and festive entertaining. To graciously greet your guests, to add warmth to the welcome, to give extra full pleasure to your holiday meals, be sure to have plenty of Roma wines on hand. Roma California wines offer you sherry, port, muscatel, and tokay for entertaining, Burgundy and Sauterne for mealtime enjoyment, and gay Roma California champagne to make any happy occasion unforgettable. Each of these fine Roma wines brings you the goodness of luscious grapes, gathered at peak of flavor, gently pressed, then unhurriedly brought to delicious perfection under the patient guidance of Roma's ancient winemaking skill. Bottled at Roma's own famed wineries in California's choicest vineyard districts. Enjoy the taste luxury of fine Roma wines more often, for Roma's new low prices enable you to save as much as 1/4. Insist on Roma wines. No other wines offer you so much for so little. That's why more Americans enjoy Roma than any other wine. Roma, R-O-M-A, Roma wines.
And now Roma Wines bring back to our Hollywood soundstage Zachary Scott as Frederick Carlson in Murder Off Key, a play well calculated to keep you in suspense.
The heavy blonde man with the soft voice asked a few more questions after that, and then he left. The motive was robbery. Very valuable jewelry and a great deal of money. Everything gone. It seemed Violet was in the habit of drawing out large sums and keeping them around in old beaded purses and tarnished gilt boxes. It all fitted in with Violet, who was so helpless without her pillar of strength, and who sang those desperate jangling scales. Obviously, she had no idea of financial matters. But somebody else had plenty of other ideas, and I was one of them. I knew it that night when I went around to the corner automat. Yes, I was definitely one of them. There was no doubt about it.
Do you mind if I join you, Mr. Carlson?
It was Soft Voice, smiling down at me over a cup of coffee and a piece of pie. Murder a la mode.
I always come here for their apple pie. You ever tried it?
Haven't gotten around to it.
You should. It's excellent. Can I have the sugar? Thank you. How'd you happen to come here for your vacation?
Oh, I don't know. I was short on cash, and then Morley wrote and suggested I stay in his place. It seemed like a good idea at the time.
You don't have that letter, do you?
Say, what is this?
No need to get excited, Mr. Carlson. I was just asking. Oh, you really should try this pie. The apples are just right, firm and tart. Dog.
How should I know?
Very interesting angle. I understand he was a regular burglar alarm. Always barked if anyone ever came to the door. And then he disappears the night before her death. Very convenient. Don't you agree?
It would look that way.
Perhaps more of that sugar. Thank you. I never seem to get enough. Did you drive up to New York?
That's right, and I haven't run over any dogs or anything else, so you can skip that.
There's no need to get excited, Mr. Carlson. I never suggested that you did. I was just asking a simple question.
If you haven't any more simple questions on your mind, I'll be going on.
Of course. Don't let me detain you. I think I'll have another piece of this pie. You really should try it sometime, Mr. Carlson.
As I walked away, I could feel him watching me, hunched over the table, his small eyes wary and suspicious. There's no doubt about it. I was the idea. I rode around on top of the bus for almost an hour, and I kept thinking about the dog and that white fur and those stained newspapers. I knew I had to go to the garage and have another look at my car. The garage seemed deserted, and only one arc light cut the blackness that stretched silently ahead. It was then I passed the office booth when I first heard the voices. There were two men, and they were standing by my car. It was soft voice, full of apple pie and suspicion and wide awake on those 2 cups of coffee. He was asking Joe about my car.
It looked like he hit something. But I couldn't say it was a dog. It might have been a cat.
But you're certain about the white fur.
Huh?
Was there anything else you noticed?
No. No, I don't think. Well, yeah, there were some newspapers. At first I thought, seeing as how they were all stained, that maybe he had put in them whatever hit, you know? Excuse me a minute. Somebody must be out there.
Well, Mr. Carlson, glad you came in. Perhaps you can clear up a few things for us.
Look, I don't know anything about the newspapers or the stain, but I can tell you this much. I never ran over a dog, and I can prove it.
Well, then, that's all we're interested in.
I haven't taken the car out since I came to New York. Joe here can tell you that.
Well, you did take it out once, Mr. Carlson, the night before last.
Are you crazy?
Well, gee, I'm sorry, Mr. Carlson, but I remember you called me up and asked me to bring it around. Here, you can look at my record book. You must have forgotten about it, because, 9 o'clock.
9 o'clock. That must have been just about the time the elevator boy took the dog for his walk.
From that time on, Soft Voice was after me. I was his man, and he didn't miss a trick.
Now, you say you talked to Carlson last Saturday?
Yes, I was sitting out on the balcony.
Did he mention Mrs. Pondecker in the conversation?
We heard her singing. She had an awful voice. And he asked about her, whether she had a family or lived alone. I don't remember anything else. But it was the oddest thing. I mean, his suggesting strangling her and now this. Makes you think, doesn't it?
And Mr. Carlson came to your door the other night?
Yes, he was asking for some woman by the name of Violet. At first, I never connected it with Mrs. Pondecker. She seemed a bit old for him, but you never can tell. Probably mutual interest in music.
Yeah, that's right. I came to get the dog, and this Carlson guy opens the door. But I don't think nothing of it. Working on the elevator, you see a lot of that, you know. Oh, some of the stuff I could tell you.
It was about this time that I began hearing those scales again. They were so shrill and desperate, I thought everyone else must hear them, too. I even heard her on the elevator. What are you staring at?
Nothing, Mr. Carlson. This is your floor. Hey, do you think the police will catch a guy who done it?
I don't know.
I figure it must have been somebody who knew her and been in her place. Those old dames always go for the young guys. I say, find her boyfriend, and you got to kill her. Am I right?
Why ask me? How should I know?
Well, you don't have to get sore, Mr. Carlson. I was just asking.
Well, what are you waiting for?
Me? Nothing.
Well, shut up. Stop it, do you hear me? The concert's over.
Good evening, Mr. Carlson.
Oh.
I hope I didn't startle you. The elevator boy let me in.
Well, what's on your mind?
I just wanted to go over a few points with you. Do you know anything about a resort called Orchard Beach? It's not far from here.
Yes, I stayed there for a couple of weeks last summer. Why?
Strange you never ran into Mrs. Pondecker. She played in the summer theater there.
I told you I never saw her before I came here. If you're trying to pin this on me, you're wasting your time. Look, how could I have planned this thing? I never even knew I was coming here until Morley wrote me and asked me. He'll tell you that.
Unfortunately, we can't seem to contact Mr. Morley. You don't have his present address, do you?
All he said was something about a camping trip, but he's bound to turn up in a couple of days, and he'll set you straight on all this.
That is, if he turns up alive.
What do you mean by that?
I was just considering a possibility. After all, if anything happened to Mr. Morley, he couldn't back up your story, and he couldn't deny it either, could he? Well, I'll be getting along. Good night, Mr. Carlson.
That night, the scales were louder than ever. They went on, over and over, echoing in the room, shrill and urgent, and I couldn't shut them out. Shut up, do you hear me? Shut up!
What the devil's going on in here?
Morley, good Lord, I thought you'd never turn up.
Well, I always say it's nice to be wanted, but if I'm not too inquisitive, may I ask what you're doing in my place?
I'm waiting for you so you can tell him about that letter.
Letter?
The one you wrote when you asked me to come here.
Well, now, look, I don't care if you stayed here, but I didn't write you.
But you must have, Morley. I read the letter. I tell you, I saw it. I held it in my hand. It was real.
All right, Carlson, don't be so tragic about it. After all, it's not a matter of life and death.
It certainly is. Look, Morley, you don't know what's been going on here. Ever since I got here. The whole thing's got me nearly crazy. There doesn't seem to be any way out.
Well, Carlson, there's no point in sitting out here on the balcony all night.
No?
Oh, I'll admit you're in a bad jam, but it's not hopeless. They haven't arrested you.
It's only a matter of time.
But they haven't any proof. And I can tell the police I wrote that letter. I suppose I can.
Well, you'll have to be more convincing than that. No thanks. My neck's in the noose, and I might as well face it.
Now, let's not be noble, Carlson. It's only a technicality. I think I can make them believe me.
Too late now. They're here.
Who's here?
The police. The car just pulled up.
Are you sure?
Soft voice. Yeah. And I don't like the way he's bouncing with so much energy.
Why should he come now?
Someone must have tipped him off your back. He was anxious to see you as I was. Morley, is there backstairs here?
Yes, why?
I'm going to try to get out. It's my only chance. Will you help me?
Sure, certainly, Carlson. I'll show you where to go. I can at least do that.
I had to try. I couldn't just lie down and take that rap, and there was no way under heaven I could escape it legally. I followed Morley off the balcony, and when we got to his living room, it was almost more than I could stand. Because the singing started again, but not the scales this time. Roses of Picardy. Roses of Picardy. She was going to follow me all my life. I almost dropped in my tracks. Something, I guess you'd call it a hunch. Something about the stiffness of Morley's back made me hang on. And Morley swung around. It was more than a hunch. Morley was sweating. I decided to play it for all it was worth.
Who's that?
Who's what?
Don't you hear something?
What are you talking about?
Nothing. Hey, come on, you better hurry.
Well, I don't know.
Hurry up, Carlson.
I don't know. Now that I think of it, I don't know.
You said yourself.
Yeah, but all my life I'd be ducking the law for something I didn't do.
You said yourself it's your only chance.
Yeah, but that'd be worse than being convicted. Anyway, how could they convict me? The evidence is all circumstantial.
There's an awful lot of evidence, Carlson. The dog being killed by your car, the threat you made against her, and your being at Orchard Beach the same time she was there.
Yeah, that's a clincher, all right. But how did you know? How did you know I was at Orchard Beach? I never told you. You haven't talked to Soft Voice yet. Come on, Morley. Tell me how you did it. Tell me how you killed Mrs. Pondecker.
You're out of your mind.
How did you get that car business fixed? Did you disguise your voice and take the keys while I was out of the apartment? That would be simple enough to do.
Crazy.
And that sheet music on the balcony. Did you plant it? Well, you had me right where you wanted me. A beautiful frame-up. It's a shame to ruin it.
I don't have to ruin it. I can...
No, no. You can't kill me, Morley. I'm your fall guy. Remember?
I can kill you in self-defense. I can kill a murderer who's living in my apartment, who's threatened me. Unfortunately, the police didn't get here in time, and in simple self-defense, I had to...
Yeah, but they did get here in time, Morley.
Yes, Carlson. You're very lucky.
How much did you hear?
Enough. He was a slick boy. He had you measured for the noose, all right. How did you get him to open up?
Well, in a way, I didn't. It was the Roses of Picardy.
Roses of...
Well, I thought it was Mrs. Pondecker. When she started Roses of Picardy, Morley thought so, too. It scared him green. Scared him more than me. You know, I thought everyone felt the same about Violet's singing, but not the little girl next door. The only thing she had against Violet's voice was professional jealousy. She thought her voice was better, but Violet's could drown her out. Listen. Well, someone else will have to strangle her.
Roma Wines have brought you Zachary Scott, as star of Murder Off Key, tonight's study in Suspense.
This is Truman Bradley for Roma Wines, the sponsor of Suspense. Are you planning now for that Thanksgiving dinner next week? Well, here's a timely suggestion from famed hostess Elsa Maxwell. This Thanksgiving, many families will be together for the first time in years, enjoying the traditional turkey and trimmings and pumpkin pie. At dessert time, I suggest serving Roma California Muscatel. Roma Muscatel is a glorious ending to a festive meal. Yes, at dessert time or later in the evening, Golden Roma Muscatel is the choice refreshment wine. Served cool, Roma Muscatel is delicious with dessert or later with nuts or cake. A wine mellow indeed, bursting with golden sweetness. Roma Muscatel brings you the distinctive fragrance and the warming taste richness of the famous Muscat grape. Like all Roma wines, Roma Muscatel is a true wine, unvaryingly good always. Made in California, enjoyed throughout the world. Remember, because of uniformly fine quality at low cost, more Americans enjoy Roma than any other wine. Insist on Roma, R-O-M-A, fine Roma wines.
Zachary Scott appeared through the courtesy of Warner Brothers Studios and is currently appearing in Mildred Pierce. Next Thursday, we bring you Lloyd Nolan in Suspense, radio's outstanding theater of thrills.
Presented by Roma Wines, R-O-M-A, made in California for enjoyment throughout the world. This is CBS, the Columbia Broadcasting System.